Good afternoon. It's MacKenzie here alongside Brett Turner over at Greenleaf Property Management. We've got a little bit different take than our usual Wednesday night shop talk. This is our expert series. So Brett and I were talking and just kind of providing a different look on managing your portfolio as some of you guys are getting in the game and acquiring more properties. Just another perspective to view your portfolio in. Kind of help you guys as you work along growing with your landlord and investing. Before we get into the thick of it here, I wasn't on the Shop Talk show last night, and I happened to tune in at the very end, and I found out that we got a copyright strike both from Facebook and YouTube for playing a 1980s song on the intro. So Chris, you're doing such a good job. I heard you were collecting you're giving out $5 for every positive comment you got. So I heard you had $25 or something. But I had to go and delete our Facebook show. So I will go and repost it with a YouTube link. But Facebook got us. So Brett.
You guys are getting so big, MacKenzie. You can't stay off the radar now, man.
Right. Yeah, that was. I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh. Copyright strike. Well, that's not good, but no harm, no foul. They just ask you either you dispute it, which we definitely didn't have the rights to the song, so it was a pretty simple solution to delete it. But at least with YouTube, it just kind of cut out the 20 seconds, and we kept the original content in the show and people's comments, which is kind of a good thing because there's some good conversations going on. So I'll repost that into the group. But Brett, I know you've got some great conversation lined up. Today we were supposed to go at noon. My fault. I was preoccupied with another commitment. So I ended up getting it bumped back. But thanks for making some time here a little bit later in the afternoon. So it's a late lunch and learn with Brett Turner. And Brett, what are we talking about today?
Right on. Well, thanks again for having me here, MacKenzie. So, I mean, the last time that I had the opportunity to speak here to the community members, we were talking about the concept of asset management. So, a lot of the engagement and a lot of the dialogue on the community forum page is related around property management. I mean, we're all landlords, we all have investment properties, and we've got tenants, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with them and level ourselves up as real estate investors. And so, with my position as a brokerage owner here in Calgary, we look after hundreds of properties. I've been a real estate investor for many years. And I've had the benefit of being able to watch new investors work their way up the ladder in terms of, how they go about running their business. And so what I wanted to do in our talk today is just take this same concept up to the next level. So we've talked a little bit about property management, and I know we'll be talking more about property management in the day or the weeks and months to come. But we then talked about asset management, which is looking at your property as an overall asset, and then how can you run it with all of the factors built in to maximize the overall returns of your asset, not just looking at it through the lens of a property manager. Well, today I want to go one level up beyond that and talk about how to manage a portfolio of assets, a portfolio of investment property. So hoping to talk a little bit about that today, MacKenzie.
Well, let's get into it. I'm kind of excited to hear what you got for us.
Yeah, great. Well, first, before we started that, I wanted to provide a quick update on the market here in Calgary and Southern Alberta. So I've had a couple of videos and talked a little bit about it in January, and then now what we found is January statistics have been released, and it's basically the same story here. So to give you a bit of a background on that, the last 3 months of 2020 in Calgary, we had more sales and less inventory, so less active listings than we'd had over that same time period in 2019. So a big improvement in our real estate market here. And then January has continued the same trend, which to me shows that we're going to have an active spring market here. I would expect these trends to continue. So a great time for anybody that has an investment property that you maybe don't want or you were looking to get out of. You will have more buyer interest this year. But also a sign of caution to anybody who finds themselves in the shoes of being a buyer this year is it's going to be a more competitive environment for purchasers of property here in 2021.
Perfect. Yeah, and if I recall correctly from our last kind of market update to see where things are going from an investment perspective. You're calling pretty bold. You doubled your prediction from the previous year of a 1% appreciation increase this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I had, so in the pro formas that I use, I've been using, or in 2020, I was using a 0.5% growth rate. So less than or about a half a percentage point per year of price growth. And I've doubled that here for the early part of 2021 to 1%, even though there are some groups out there, like the Calgary Real Estate Board, they're forecasting around a 1 to 1.4% price increase this year. But the Canadian Real Estate Association, which looks at all of the markets in Canada, is saying Alberta as a province could be looking at a 7% appreciation rate here this year. So, crazy. It sounds crazy for Albertans considering what we've been through since the latter half of 2014.
Yeah.
But we finally look like we might have some growth in our real estate market here, which is an exciting thing to think about.
Awesome. I'm just going to throw some notes.
So that kind of theme leads into, the message that I would like to get across to community members is don't come on to the page and don't wake up each day thinking of yourself as a do-it-yourself property manager. And that if you think of your managing your rental properties that way, eventually it will burn you out and you will lose an opportunity to think of yourself as something, a little bit bigger than just a property manager, which I feel is really important for anybody that got into this for wealth building in real estate. And so it's just a different way of looking at your rental property business. And I think that it's certainly benefited me. It's certainly benefited countless clients of ours in our property management company, and is a sort of frame of mind that I would love for community members to start to embrace, especially as we head into a growth year, and hopefully we see asset values coming up.
Yeah, it's probably like, and I'm always interested to kind of get these new perspectives because, I'm no different than most of the landlords out there. At times it is a daily grind. Like right now this month, I'm flipping over a tenancy that is only 6 months into a 12-month lease because my tenant needed to break it, and you know what? You can't hold someone if they decide to leave. So now I'm doing an extra set of viewings and all that, and I'm just like, it kind of can be challenging at times. So, Brett, I'm very interested to kind of look at this. It's so
easy to stay in the weeds, MacKenzie, right? It's a never-ending stream of problems, and you can kind of feel like you're bushwhacking, especially if you have a couple of these properties. But what I like to just recommend to investors is think of yourself as a real estate entrepreneur. That your job isn't to go and handle, the front end of this stuff all the time, and that's it. Really what you're doing is steering your whole portfolio, your whole asset, your collection of real estate assets that you have, and that the property management part of it is one component of it. I mean, it's a big part for sure. We need tenants in there. We need the rental income. But you can make it easier on yourself as a landlord if you position your assets and your portfolio to take you further to where you want to go. It just makes it easier for you to approach the business of landlording, right? So an example of this would be, and we talked about this in the last one, is having the right financing on a property. Interest rates are much, much lower now than they were a year ago. You could refinance a property or re-amortize a property to reduce your mortgage payments and create a little bit more of a buffer for yourself from 1 month to the next, right?
Absolutely.
Other things that investors can do would be to, renovate a property on a tenancy turnover or on an acquisition in such a way as to get ahead of future repairs or maintenance issues. So going and getting a property inspection done on a property you own already, and on your next vacancy, plan to get in there to address some of the deficiencies so that you have less anxiety about getting a phone call in the middle of the night in the winter about your furnace not working, your tenant's furnace not working, or pipes freezing, because you've gotten ahead of this with a little bit of planning relating to your assets.
Yeah, and the way to make that kind of into a secondary win, well, you have to do some of this work. And if you've got a really good tenant in place, come back and pitch it to them and say, hey, Mr. Tenant, you've been phenomenal. can I reward you by, let's do an upgrade to the property. We're looking at doing this, but if you swing a little extra in for them, you get the opportunity to do it. You probably don't have to compensate them for doing the renovations while they're present, and then they're happy too, because you're looking after the property and making it better and kind of rewarding them at the same time.
You bet. That's right. And if you do that, it causes you to, as an investor, not to focus so much on just the property management parts, and it will allow you to have a much more rewarding experience as a rental property owner, when you can look at it through the lens of wealth building as an asset manager or a portfolio manager.
I love it. Absolutely, little mindset.
Okay. So we've talked about property management. We've talked a little bit about asset management. Today, I wanted to talk about portfolio management in real estate, because this is where it starts to get really powerful. Because if you stick with it through your first property, and your second and your third property, and you have a portfolio of investment properties, well, now you can start to get some of what we call economies of scale working for you. And this could be stuff like, if you've got enough properties out there, you may be able to get on a sort of shortened list with your handyman, where if you need something, they're there that much quicker, or you can get preferred rates because you're sending them enough business. You may be able to get preferential treatment at the bank. You might be able to get better fees on your monthly account charges with them because you hold so many mortgages, or you have enough rental income moving through your accounts there that you qualify for another treatment tier within the bank. So these are some of the things that happen for real estate investors as they grow their business, which makes it easier and easier for them to elevate themselves out of having to deal with all of the day-to-day property management related items.
Yeah, and when you're in the weeds doing the bushwhacking, these things aren't always like top of mind until you realize you've got a little bit of leverage, because hey, you're a higher value client now, because the typical client might have one mortgage and you're at 3 or 4.
That's right. Yeah. And other things that you get would be, multiple property discounts with your insurer, so that your insurance rates can come down. You can go. So I found this out when I transitioned from, I think it was when I got my 7th or 8th investment property years and years and years ago. They made it such that, well, now you can get a commercial insurance policy that blankets all of your properties. And you will find that the individual unit rate comes down considerably when you can do that. So your cash flow situation improves, and you get better treatment from your insurer on claims and that sort of thing. And so again, you get that when you have a portfolio of investment properties, and it allows you now to spend your energy, your time, and effort on the relationships related to managing your portfolio, right? And one of those can be starting to scale yourself out of the day-to-day management of your properties, which is one of the things I'd like to talk about next.
Yeah, let's get into it. I just want to highlight though, like if you can go to that commercial side and cut down your insurance, especially, I don't know about what other people have seen, but I know I had 2 renewals I had to do here in January, and with my previous provider, it was an 80% year-over-year increase, which was atrocious. So if you can start flexing some opportunities with the economies of scale, I mean, there's some potential there for huge savings.
You have to remember that if you only own one rental property, or one or two of them, banks and insurers and that kind of group, they're sort of set up for that. But you're kind of on the outside of the main lane that they like, which is standard kind of owner-occupied business. But if you get a couple investment properties together, and then now you're bringing a volume, millions of dollars of real estate to an insurer or to a lender to go in and help you manage it. then now you look a little bit different in their eyes, and it's kind of like, oh, well, right this way. They do make it easier for you, and they take a little bit better care of you, which if you work the relationships in the right way, you can reduce your operating costs and make it a lot easier on your month to month, so that you don't stress out quite as much if you've got to give a bit of a break to a tenant, or you get an unexpected vacancy. You're just insulated from it a little bit more, and I find it takes less out of you than it can if you've got one or two places and you're just all over them all the time, fully immersed in all of the details. It can sometimes become difficult to see further ahead down the road towards building wealth with real estate.
Yep, I can 100% experience in that, and I can totally agree. So yeah. Our first question, you want to tackle this one?
Sure.
Yeah, they're just talking about the blanket insurance policy, this commercial type insurance policy. Is this something that's commonly available? Like, where would a person, if a landlord's kind of getting to this kind of level, where would they be looking for this kind of coverage?
Yeah, so you'll want to talk to an insurance agent and just position yourself and say, look, I'm a real estate investor. I own a number of real estate investment properties. I'm looking for a proposal for the insurance of all of my units. And then now you've got millions of dollars of real estate coming into a firm. You've got lots of rental income that's coming in. So it's a bigger policy, and they will quote you differently than they would if you just did it one at a time. You will certainly do better by coming with all of your deals at once. So with insurers, what you can do is you can say, okay, well, I've owned all of these properties for X many years. I'm all right to have a certain amount of rental income coverage stretched across all of my properties. I'm okay to have a commercial general liability insurance. This is something that I use, so that something happens at one of your properties or something like that, you pay a little bit extra for it, but then you don't have to worry about a tenant coming after you for this or the other thing, because you've got a commercial liability policy that stretches across all of the properties that you have. Harder to get that on the residential side. If you're in an owner-occupied policy and you've only got the one door, sometimes it can be a little bit more expensive to go and get that put in. But when you have a portfolio of them, now they treat you a little bit differently, and there's more options for you to choose from to both manage your costs and have better coverage.
Perfect. Yep, I fully agree. Like I'm in that two houses. I've got 4 doors here in Calgary. I did drop off a couple of my dogs, if you will, that weren't really performing, and so I'm like, I'm on the big residential side, but not big enough to get there. But I don't know who's mentioned it. I think Trish said that was Kevin, but they said their rates jumped up hugely. And like I said, one policy was 80% increase year over year, which was nuts. Yeah. But
you can find that. I had some of that too. One of the biggest things you can do to mitigate that is your deductible. So if you have your deductible set really, really low, then your rates are going to be much, much higher. But in my approach to it is I set my deductible a little bit higher. I will have it set at, say, $5,000 rather than $1,000, and it makes your payments that much less, like a much, much less than it would be if you had a lower deductible. So if you can stomach that, and your properties well enough that you're not anticipating issues, and you're not the type of person to make a claim on something that's just $1,000 or $2,000, you just go and do it, then it can make sense to raise your deductible, and the insurance groups like that.
Totally. And I think also at that side, I don't want to belabor the subject, but if you're at 7 or 8 doors, you're generally keeping up on the maintenance, because if you don't, it's going to cost you more in the long run. So again, that's probably more of an appeal as well for these commercial policies. Yeah,
you bet. That's right. Okay, so the portfolio management, again, bringing your volume of doors over to an insurance provider, talking with a local handyman or local contractors for handling repairs or maintenance issues. You can talk to them about getting special rates, inside rates with them if you have enough properties with them. This is something that we did early on, in which we've now extended it to all of the clients within our property management group. So if you're a Greenleaf client, you get access to the trades that we use at the preferred rates that we get. You wouldn't be paying retail if you went out and like you just called up a plumbing company or a mechanical company and had them come out for a call out charge. Well, when you own enough properties, or if you're underneath the umbrella of a management company, you can get much, much better rates there than it would be if you just, have to panic and you're calling up somebody on your own for your one rental property. So ways there that you can, again, use your volume to do better for you on your unit costs for each of the properties that you have.
Totally.
So the one thing I want to talk about was the property management part, MacKenzie, because I see a lot of clients sort of stressing over this and how do I go and progress myself out of this? And then the concept of having like assistants to help you with that stuff when you have enough properties. Generally speaking, what I found for really astute landlords that are really on top of their operating costs and they want to be highly present within the management of their properties, they're also usually the same type of investors that are successful in acquiring more properties. They're just that much more entrepreneurial, and they just attract more people to their ecosystem to continue to raise capital and buy more doors. But if you're finding that, okay, now I'm at 2 to 3 properties in an area. What do I do to try and pull myself out of this? I've got vacancies that are coming up. How do I manage some of this? How do I manage my communication with my tenants? Well, when you have a couple doors, you can start to look at whether or not it makes more sense for you to bring in a part-time assistant to help you out a few times of the year when you might be busier with your renewals or your releasings, or someone to go to your properties and do your inspections, your mid-lease inspections for you, little things like that. So when you own enough doors, you can often fit this in now because you've been able to reduce the costs on other expense items on your P&L. So as we mentioned, your insurance expense or your repairs or maintenance expense, to allow you now to budget in just a few hours of administrative or part-time help time to alleviate that concern from you as the property owner. And this is that idea of leveling yourself out of just the property management of your portfolio to the asset management or then the portfolio management of it as well. So that's something that I've seen people do. It's quite successful.
So you're buying back your time, which I think is so critical, and you're not buying yourself a job, right? You're getting the opportunity to get your time back, and that's a huge takeaway. Something I find even right now. I've got a day job, and we're definitely part of this landlording community, and I've got my doors on the side, and some days I realize, oh man, the last few days I didn't actually improve anything in the business. I've just been doing in the weeds. So if you can scale up and buy back some of that time and get those processes in place, that's a huge win.
Absolutely. If you have enough properties, it can make sense then to make investments in stuff like a digital signature software package. You could get a quick little subscription to, like a DocuSign or something like that, where now you have enough leases that you need to do or redo a year that it can save you the trouble of printing them off and driving down to the property to go to meet somebody in person to have them sign it. You can just do it digitally now, right? You can look at setting up storage on online cloud platforms to keep all of your documentation and all of your leases and everything in there, which when you have just one property, it might not seem like quite the thing to do. But when you have 5 or 6 of them, it makes a heck of a lot of sense so that all of that documentation is there for you when you need to go and talk to an insurer or talk to a bank about coming in with several mortgages on your property to get preferred rates there as well. So little things like that, when you start to think about operational efficiency, not just from a property management side of it, but how do you keep your whole portfolio together, you can start to level yourself out of the day-to-day. And when you do that, now you're up on top steering this like giant enterprise of your rental properties that you have. It's just so much more of a rewarding experience. And I tend to find that owners that have positioned themselves like that usually make better decisions in the heat of the moment when faced with, a tenant lease breaking halfway through a lease or something like that, right? They just have a smoother delivery. And I find that the damage isn't quite as bad as it is if someone is just right in there close to the bone on every issue with their investment properties.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we're taking this bird's eye view of the portfolio. You're leveraging economies of scale on the different expense items to bring them down. Is there anything else part of this picture that you want to touch base on, Brett?
Yeah, I think, just this idea of pushing through, that having 1 or 2 properties, right? And really trying to get yourself up to having, 4 to 5 of them. And if you can think about it in terms of, if you did nothing other than just keep your properties together, like if you went out and bought, $400,000-$500,000 investment properties, well, you've got $2 million worth of assets that are out there in the market working for you. We've talked about appreciation rates here to kick off the show today, where, we're forecasting 1%, 2%, or 3%, appreciation rates. Well, I mean, if you've got a $2 million portfolio that starts to appreciate for you, well, that is like, it can be the equivalent of 1 or 2 full-time jobs, right, of asset wealth and wealth building that you can have going for you as a real estate investor. And that will make the little issues that you deal with just seem so much smaller, and they will stress you out way less when you have that amount of property out there appreciating and your tenants paying off all of that mortgage debt for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of highlight on that, we're just coming out of January here, and I got my annual mortgage statements back, and I had principal pay down averaging about $1,000 a month on one of my properties, and $750 on the second one. And I'm like, that's just money going to the bank because my properties haven't declined in value. I
had the experience. This would be 6 or 7 years ago now. When I had a lot of property, and it was a super busy time in my life, and it just felt like nothing was going right for me. I would get a bad client file here or there, or, a property issue or something like that. And everybody has felt like this at one time or another. And then as I was just sort of down in the dumps a little bit, another real estate investor, experienced guy, just sort of said, well, why are you allowing it to keep you up at night? You shouldn't be worrying about that. Because, with the size of your portfolio and with where mine was at the time, I was paying off, $19,000 to $20,000 worth of principal every month, right? Which was more than, $500 to $700 a day during, when you think of it that way. And so you're not doing anything for that. All you're doing is keeping your portfolio together, and that's happening behind the scenes for you, right? And if you're just stuck at the property management level and just dealing with tenants and that's it, you will lose sight of that. But if you can push yourself to go and acquire a couple solid cash flowing investment properties, then you level yourself out of those issues and are now more in the mission of wealth building. And it's way less stressful, and is a big reason why I think a lot of people get into investing in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? When it's in the grind and you're dealing with the calls, which I can totally relate with, it's tough to see that until you go back and look at the numbers, like, oh, that's what I made this year? Huh.
That's right.
That's nice.
Yeah. And you only get that feeling when you go and open up the statement, right? But you get the other end of that every week when a tenant is calling you for this problem or that problem or something like that. It's so easy to just have the blinders on and focus on some of the negative operational issues that we have to deal with, when as real estate investors, we've got these assets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that are out there, and that money is working for us day in, day out. And I found that is the type of headspace that I am most comfortable in, that allows me to be a better business owner and entrepreneur, rather than focusing on the kind of tip of the spear managerial issues day in, day out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you wanted to keep the show a little bit shorter, Brett, as we've made some adjustments on our time, and we're at the 30-minute mark.
Yep.
Where do we want to tie up the show with here, and what do you got going?
Yeah, so we've just more about the wealth building journey, and how, if you've got the one property and you're wondering, well, how do I go and how do I get to 2 properties? Well, there's communities that are there for that. I would love to start to see some of the stories within the landlord community of how investors went and did that, how they went from 1 property to 2 properties to 5 properties. I know there's lots of, members within your group whom I've had the opportunity to work with over the years that have overcome many challenges out there that could be of benefit to newer landlords. So for any of the landlords that have found your page where they've just got that 1 or 2 properties and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, treat yourself to a little bit of education and perhaps a little bit of engagement from other senior landlords that have been able to add more properties to their portfolio and allow themselves to level themselves out of the day-to-day and more towards the asset management and portfolio management part of the business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big take on that too is, and I know we talked about this last time as well, but I just think it's so important to re-highlight again, is when you get into these properties, you want to make sure you've got that cash flow and you're set up with some flexibility. I mean, you talked about, Brett, last time, which I think is a great tip, in these low interest rate times to refinance, to increase the cash flow by bringing down your monthly mortgage payment. It does seem kind of counterintuitive if you're maybe increasing your amortization period, but man, you can move that cash around. You can do other lump sum payments with it. But
for sure you can.
Like you said, if you have the money to outsource things that are grinding you right now, you're going to be in the game much longer. And you're going to see those benefits that we're all striving for.
Within portfolio management, and part of what I want to set up for future talks is managing different types of assets within your portfolio. So to give you a bit of an idea, two different sides of the managerial approach that I have personally. So I own a luxury condo in Kelowna. I manage it as basically a short-term rental, an Airbnb style. So lots of hands on the management part of it. It's got to look good. Every single thing inside the property has to look great in order for that asset to be used to its best potential. On the other side of that, I own properties here in Calgary that are effectively teardowns, where I don't want to put any money into these properties because eventually they're going to be sold to a developer who's just going to tear down the house. It doesn't make sense for me to go and make major upgrades into a property like that. So dealing with the tenant profiles with either of those two types of streams requires a sort of sense of portfolio management. How do I, deal with one asset in my portfolio in such a way, but it might not be the same way for another type of property. And you can only really have that experience if you're ready to be a portfolio manager, if you're ready to own a number of different types of investment properties, so you can kind of switch from one lane to another, depending on what you need to do for the properties that you own.
Sounds like a great topic for a future show. Just, here's some tactics in this startup entry home tear down if you're like an RC2 lot where it's got potential for an infill, and then if you're going short-term rentals or if you're multifamily, there's so many different dynamics and the nuances of managing the property.
That's the beautiful part about real estate is there's so many different ways that you can do this, and so many different types of properties out there that really cater themselves, or that investors can tailor their skills towards. If you're a landlord that's really, really handy, and you're a tough person, you're a tough landlord, you can handle some of these properties that are a little bit less expensive, that are harder to manage, both from a repairs and maintenance and a tenancy management perspective, but you can get your dollar to go further. Another way would be if you've got a little bit more money and you're really good on the phones and you're good at managing relationships, well, you could do the short-term Airbnb style and have much, much higher cash flows and much, much higher income to manage because the daily rates are so much higher for that type of asset class. So part of the journey going from property management to asset management to portfolio management is that you will learn who you really are as a real estate investor and what talents you have and where you need to support your skill set and help fill in some of the gaps in your skill set and your talent pool that you have. And that's an exciting part of the journey as well that many different investors have been through and recognized that, just because your first property was what worked well for you doesn't mean that your 9th, 10th, 11th property are necessarily going to be exactly the same as that.
Yeah, amen to that. There's you'll learn quickly what you like and you don't like, and there's different strategies to suit your needs. So you don't have to repeat the same thing. I love it.
Right. Great. That's all I had for you here today, MacKenzie. A little bit of a shorter show today, but certainly looking forward to helping community members along that journey. If there's anyone that's trying to figure out what do I buy next, I'm trying to get out of this type of problem with my next property. How do I do that? I'd love to help out. If there's anybody that's in that position here in the Calgary market, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to meet with you and talk you through some of the things that I've gone through and perhaps recommend a course of action for you.
Yeah, brilliant, Brett. Well, thank you very much for your time. Super enlightening. For the folks that don't know how to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I mean, you can leave a comment here in this. You can send me a direct message through Facebook as well, or just send me an email, invest@redlinerealestate.ca. Great way to get a hold of me. I check it all the time, and I won't miss it if you send me an email through that.
Perfect. And I think what we'll do as well is I would love to get that conversation going in the group, how people have gotten over that hurdle where you kind of get that 3 to 4 and you're trying to make a step to the next part. And, there's always that objections of hitting the money wall, the lending walls, and all that kind of stuff. Listen to the senior members because it is doable. There's always a way, and sometimes it's not very clear until you talk to somebody else.
It's totally doable, and lots and lots of people have done this. So if you're stuck and you're not quite sure where to go, that's a big part of my career as a real estate agent, has been helping real estate investors do that. How can you find the money for the next down payment? How can you bring partners into your business the right way to support you? So over the year, MacKenzie, I know we'll have lots of time to talk about that, but if we can get the discussion going, it can flush out some of these issues. We can key in on the themes and look to create videos for community members that support where their interests lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And building the professional teams and all those good things. Well, thank you, Brett, for your time. We'll queue you up. We're starting another segment, so this is our expert series. We still do the Wednesday night shop talk shows, where that's more or less in the weeds kind of part of the business. But we wanted to have some of these high-level discussions, as there's more than many ways to look at investing in these portfolios, as we are all landlords, because we're here for our futures, and it's a good discussion to have. So, Brett, thanks you for sharing this and leading it on, and we're going to be doing it again here very soon with you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, MacKenzie. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Bye.